a lonely millionaire sees two twin brothers selling an old toy car in the park. They say they need the money to buy medicine for their sick mother. Touched by their story, he decides to follow them and discovers a reality he never imagined. What he does next leaves everyone in shock and changes the lives of that family forever. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like this video and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The grandfather clock in Thomas Reynolds' study struck 6, its resonant chime echoing through the vast emptiness of the Beacon Hill mansion. Without looking up from his laptop, Thomas knew it was time to end his workday. Precision and routine had become his religion in the 5 years since the accident. Mr. Reynolds, his assistant's voice came through the intercom. The board members have confirmed tomorrow's meeting. Also, Mr. Chen from Singapore will be calling at 7 instead of 8. Thank you, Diane. You can go home now, Thomas replied, his voice carrying the practiced neutrality he had perfected over the years. At 46, Thomas Reynolds was at the pinnacle of his career as the CEO of Reynolds Technologies, a Boston-based tech empire that had revolutionized medical software. His face occasionally graced the covers of business magazines, always with the same steely gaze that had earned him the nickname the Ice King of Tech. What those magazines failed to mention was how that ice had formed layer by painful layer after losing his wife Jennifer and son Michael in a tragic car accident 5 years ago. Thomas closed his laptop and walked to the window. Spring had arrived in Boston, painting the city in vibrant colors that seemed to mock the grayscale of his existence. His reflection stared back at him, perfectly tailored suit, meticulously trimmed salt and pepper hair, and eyes that hadn't truly seen anything in years. His evening routine was as predictable as the tides. Dinner alone at the mahogany table meant for 12. A glass of Macallan 18, neat. An hour of reading reports. And finally, sleep in the guest room because even after all this time, he couldn't bear to enter the master bedroom he had once shared with Jennifer. But tonight, an unusual restlessness crawled under his skin. Perhaps it was the change of seasons, or perhaps it was the anniversary of the accident approaching in 2 weeks. Whatever the cause, Thomas found himself doing something he hadn't done in months, going for a walk without purpose. The evening. Air in Boston Public Garden felt foreign against his face. Couples strolled hand in hand. Children chased each other around flowering bushes, and elderly men played chess near the lagoon. Thomas walked among them like a ghost, unseen and unseeing, until a small voice cut through his fog. "Mister, would you like to buy our car?" Thomas stopped and turned toward the voice. 2 identical boys, no older than 10, stood behind a makeshift cardboard stand. Their copper-colored hair caught the evening sun, and their faces were sprinkled with freckles. One of them held up a toy car, a vintage model Corvette that had clearly been loved intensely. The paint was chipped, one of the doors hung loose, and the windshield had a small crack. "It's a collector's item," the boy holding the car said importantly. "Our grandpa gave it to us, but we need to sell it." "It's worth a lot," added his twin with a solemn nod that seemed too adult for his young face. "But we're only asking for $50. Thomas almost continued walking, almost retreated back into the bubble of isolation he had created, but something in the determined set of the boy's shoulders made him pause. "Why are you selling? Something so special?" he asked, his voice rusty from disuse. The twins exchanged a look, a silent communication that reminded Thomas painfully of conversations he'd once had with Jennifer, with just a glance. "Our mum needs medicine," the first boy said. "She's really sick and we don't have insurance right now." "The pharmacy said it costs $48, added the second boy, "so 50 would cover it." Thomas studied them more carefully. Their clothes were clean but worn, their sneakers scuffed and faded. Despite their obvious poverty, there was a dignity in how they stood, chins up, eyes direct. They weren't begging, they were trading something precious to them. "What are your names?" Thomas asked. "I'm Ethan Miller," said the boy, holding the cure's car. "And I'm Noah," said his brother. "We're twins, but I'm 7 minutes older." "I can tell you apart," Thomas said, surprising himself with the observation. Ethan has a small scar above his right eyebrow, and Noah's left ear sticks out just a bit more. The boys looked at each other, impressed. Most people can't tell, Noah admitted. Thomas reached for his wallet. He extracted $500 bills, pocket change to him, but judging by the widening of the boys' eyes, a fortune to them. "I'll give you $500 for the car," he said. "It seems like a fair price for a collector's item." Ethan's hand trembled as he took the money. "But it's only worth—" "I know what it's worth," Thomas interrupted, gently. "To me, it's worth $500. The boys stared at the money in disbelief. Ethan carefully handed over the toy car, which Thomas accepted with more reverence than he'd shown any business contract in years. "Thank you, mister," Noah whispered. "Where do you live?" Thomas asked, the question emerging before he could stop himself. "I mean, is it far? Do you need a ride home?" The twins hesitated, years of stranger danger lectures clearly warring with their assessment of this somber man in an expensive suit. "We live in Dorchester," Ethan finally said. "In the Ashmont neighborhood. It's okay, we can take the T." "It's getting dark," Thomas said. "I'd feel better if I saw you home safely. My car is parked nearby." Another silent conference passed between the twins before Noah nodded. "Okay, but we can just show you where it is. Our mom told us never to bring anyone inside when she's not feeling well." Thomas nodded, respecting their caution. 10 minutes. Later, his sleek black Aston Martin pulled up in front of a dilapidated triple-decker in one of Boston's struggling neighborhoods. The contrast between his vehicle and the surroundings couldn't have been starker. "That's our building," Ethan pointed to the middle entrance. "We're on the second floor." Thomas was about to bid them goodbye when a crash sounded from inside, followed by a weak cry. The twins' faces paled in unison. "Mom!" they shouted, scrambling out of the car and running toward the building. Without thinking, Thomas followed. The narrow staircase was dimly lit, with peeling wallpaper and the lingering smell of cabbage and mildew. The boys burst through a door at the top of the first flight, and Thomas entered a world that existed just miles from his mansion, but might as well have been on another planet. The apartment was small, but meticulously clean. Second-hand furniture was arranged to make the most of the limited space. What struck Thomas most, however, were the walls, covered with the boys' artwork, school certificates, and family photos. This tiny apartment had more warmth than his entire mansion. On the floor near the kitchenette lay a young woman, perhaps in her early 30s, trembling with fever. A broken mug and spilled tea surrounded her. "Mom, we're back. We got money." "For your medicine?" Ethan cried, kneeling beside her. The woman tried to sit up, her movements weak. "That's wonderful, sweetie, but who—" Her gaze fell on Thomas and alarm flashed across her fever-flushed face. "I'm sorry for the intrusion," Thomas said quickly. "I'm Thomas Reynolds. Your sons were selling their toy car in the park, and I wanted to make sure they got home safely." "He gave us $500, Mom," Noah exclaimed, showing her the bills. "Now you can get all your medicine and see a doctor, too." The woman's eyes widened in disbelief, looking from the money to Thomas. "$500, but that's too much. I can't—" As she tried to stand, she swayed dangerously. Thomas moved forward instinctively, catching her before she fell. "You need medical attention," he said, noting the unhealthy heat radiating from her skin. "How long have you been ill?" "I'm Sarah Miller," she whispered, too weak to protest his support. "Just a few days. It's probably just the flu." Thomas recognized the signs of someone downplaying their condition. He'd done it himself after the accident, telling everyone he was fine when he was crumbling inside. "Mrs. Miller," "Ms.," she corrected automatically. "I'm not married." "Ms. Miller, I'd like to take you to a hospital. Massachusetts General isn't far from here." Sarah shook her head weakly. "No hospitals. We can't afford—" "I'll cover any expenses," Thomas said firmly. "Please, let me help." Something in his voice, perhaps the raw sincerity that surprised even him, made Sarah search his face. Whatever she saw there made her nod slightly. "Boys, get my purse and your overnight bags," she instructed, her voice barely audible. "Overnight bags?" Noah questioned. "If I'm going to the hospital, you'll need to stay with Mrs. Rodriguez downstairs." Sarah explained. Thomas found himself speaking again without premeditation. They can stay at my house. I have plenty of room, and it would be more convenient while you're receiving treatment. The words hung in the air, shocking everyone. Thomas most of all. For 5 years, he had kept his sanctuary pristine and empty, free from the messiness of human connection. Now he was inviting strangers into it. Sarah's fever-bright eyes held his. Why would you do that? You don't even know us. It was a fair question, and Thomas didn't have a rational answer. All he knew was that for the first time in years, the ice inside him had cracked just slightly, and the sensation was both terrifying and exhilarating. Sometimes, he said softly, people just need help. Today you need help, and I can provide it. As he helped Sarah to his car, with the twins gathering essential belongings behind them, Thomas felt like he was standing on the edge of a precipice. One step would send him plummeting back into the world of human connection, with all its messiness and pain. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he was ready to fall. The emergency room at Massachusetts General Hospital buzzed with activity. As Thomas guided Sarah through the sliding doors, the twins following closely behind. The stark fluorescent lights revealed what the dim apartment had partially hidden. Sarah's condition was worse than she'd admitted. Her skin had a grayish undertone beneath the flush of fever, and her breathing was labored. I need help, Thomas called to the triage nurse, his authoritative voice cutting through the chaos. Within moments, a team of medical staff surrounded, them transferring Sarah to a gurney. What's her name? A doctor asked, already checking Sarah's vitals. Sarah Miller, Thomas replied. She's been ill for several days. High fever, weakness, possible respiratory infection. Are you family? The nurse asked, clipboard in hand. Thomas hesitated only briefly. Yes, I'm her brother-in-law. The lie came easily, necessary to ensure. Sarah received immediate care without bureaucratic delays. And these are her sons, Ethan and Noah. The twins looked up at him with surprise but remained silent, seeming to understand the necessity of the deception. As Sarah was wheeled away for examination, Thomas guided the boys to the waiting area. They sat rigidly on the edge of their seats, small hands clutching each other's, their eyes fixed on the swinging doors through which their mother had disappeared. Is Mom going to be okay? Ethan asked, his voice small. Thomas sat between them, feeling strangely protective. The doctors here are the best in Boston. They'll take good care of her. We shouldn't have gone to the park today, Noah whispered. We should have stayed home with her. No, Thomas said firmly. If you hadn't gone to the park, I wouldn't have met you, and your mother wouldn't be getting the help she needs right now. The hours crawled by. Thomas bought sandwiches and juice for the boys, who ate mechanically, their eyes never leaving the emergency room doors. He made calls, rescheduling tomorrow's meetings and instructing his housekeeper to prepare guest rooms. Around midnight, a doctor finally approached them. Mr. Reynolds, she said, consulting her clipboard. I'm Dr. Patel. Your sister-in-law has pneumonia, quite advanced. We've started her on IV antibiotics and fluids. She's stable, but she'll need to remain hospitalized for at least a week. Thomas nodded, absorbing the information. Can we see her? Briefly. She's sedated but conscious. The twins sprang to their feet, and Thomas followed them to a curtained area where Sarah lay connected to monitors and an IV. Despite her weakness, she managed a smile when she saw her sons. My brave boys, she whispered, reaching for their hands. Mom, are you going to get better? Noah asked, his lower lip trembling. Of course I am, sweetheart. The doctors are giving me special medicine. Thomas stood back, feeling like an intruder on this intimate family moment. Yet when Sarah's gaze met his over the boys' heads, her eyes held gratitude that made him shift uncomfortably. Thank you, she mouthed silently. A nurse appeared, gently informing them that visiting hours were over. You can come back tomorrow, morning at 9, she added. But where will we sleep? Ethan asked, anxiety etching his young face. Before Sarah could respond, Thomas stepped forward. Ms. Miller, if you're comfortable with it, I'd like to take the boys to my home for the night. It's not far from here and they'd have comfortable beds. We could return first thing in the morning. Sarah studied him, maternal concern warring with practical necessity. You've already done so much." "It's no trouble," Thomas assured her. "I have plenty of space." After a moment's hesitation, Sarah nodded weakly. "Ethan, Noah, you'll go with Mr. Reynolds tonight. Be on your best behavior, okay? I'll see you tomorrow." The drive to Beacon Hill was quiet, the twins too overwhelmed by the day's events to maintain their usual chatter. When Thomas's car pulled up to the wrought iron gates of his mansion, their exhaustion momentarily gave way to awe. "You live here?" Noah gasped as the gates swung open automatically. "It's like a castle," Ethan whispered. Thomas felt a sudden self-consciousness about his home's opulence. "It's just a house," he said, as he parked in the circular driveway. "A bit too big. For one person, actually." Mrs. Peterson, his housekeeper, met them at the door, her usual stoic expression softening at the sight of the tired children. "The blue and green guest rooms are ready, Mr. Reynolds. I've put out fresh towels and some of your old t-shirts they can use as nightshirts." "Thank you, Mrs. Peterson. This is Ethan and Noah Miller. They'll be staying with us while their mother is in the hospital." The boys murmured polite greetings, suddenly shy in the grand entrance hall with its crystal chandelier and marble staircase. Thomas realized how intimidating his home must seem to children used to a modest apartment. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "Mrs. Peterson always keeps homemade cookies in the kitchen." The mention of cookies brought a flicker of interest to their tired faces. In the kitchen, a space Thomas rarely entered, Mrs. Peterson served milk and chocolate chip cookies at the central island, while Thomas awkwardly tried to make conversation. "Do you have any other family in Boston?" he asked. Ethan shook, his head, his mouth full of cookie. After swallowing, he elaborated, "It's just us and Mom. Our grandpa died last year. He lived in New Hampshire." "What about your father?" Thomas asked carefully. The twins exchanged that communicative glance. Again. "He left when we were babies," Noah explained matter-of-factly. "Mom says he wasn't ready to be a dad." Thomas nodded, feeling a surge of anger toward this unknown man who had abandoned his responsibilities. "Your mother has done a remarkable job raising you," he said sincerely. The compliment made them sit a little straighter. "Mom's the best," Ethan said proudly. "She used to be a teacher, but her school closed and she couldn't find another job. She does substitute teaching sometimes." After cookies and milk, Thomas showed them to their rooms, adjacent guest rooms that Mrs. Peterson had hurriedly personalized, with extra pillows and reading lamps. The boys stared at the large beds and private bathrooms with wonder. "We've never had our own rooms before," Noah commented, bouncing experimentally on the bed. "We share a fold-out couch at home," Ethan added. Thomas felt a tightness in his chest. "Well, you can stay in the same room if you prefer, or leave the connecting door open between rooms." The twins opted for the latter, clearly intrigued by the novelty of separate but connected spaces. As Thomas helped them settle in, he realized he hadn't interacted with children since Michael's passing. The thought of his son sent a familiar pain through him, but strangely, the presence of these boys didn't sharpen it as he might have expected. Instead, their innocent resilience seemed to create space around the grief, allowing him to breathe a little easier. "Mr. Reynolds?" Ethan's voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Can we call Mom in the morning to see how she's doing?" "Of course. And you can call me Thomas if you like." Noah yawned widely. "Thank you for letting us stay in your castle, Thomas." Despite himself, Thomas smiled, the first genuine smile to cross his face in months. "It's not a castle, but you're very welcome." After ensuring they had everything they needed, Thomas retreated to his study, the only place in the house where he truly felt comfortable. He placed the twins' toy car carefully on his desk, examining it more closely. Despite its worn condition, he could see it had once been a prized possession, the kind of toy meant to be passed down through generations. His phone buzzed with emails and messages, the outside world intruding on this strange interlude. Thomas ignored them all, something he never did. Instead, he poured himself a scotch and stared out the window at the Boston skyline, trying to make sense of the day's events. Why had he done this? Brought strangers into his carefully ordered life? Was it pity, loneliness, or something more profound, a recognition of fellow souls adrift in circumstances beyond their control? Thomas had no answers, only questions that swirled like the amber liquid in his glass. Eventually, he set down his untouched drink and made his way upstairs. Passing the guest rooms, he paused, hearing soft whispers. The boys were talking to each other across the open doorway, their voices dropping as they succumbed to exhaustion. Impulsively, Thomas continued down the hallway to a door he hadn't opened in 5 years. Michael's room remained exactly as it had been. Toy robots on the shelves, solar system mobile hanging from the ceiling, Boston Red Sox pennant on the wall. Thomas's hand rested on the doorknob, but he couldn't bring himself to turn it. Not yet. He retreated to the guest room he used as a bedroom, lying awake long into the night. For the first time in years, his thoughts weren't consumed by spreadsheets or market projections. Instead, he found himself wondering what Sarah Miller had been like before illness and hardship had etched lines into her young face. He wondered about the grandfather who had given the twins that toy car, about the life they led in their small apartment, filled with love instead of echoing emptiness. Thomas finally drifted to sleep as dawn broke over Boston, his dreams free of the nightmares that usually plagued him. Instead, he dreamed of toy cars racing across hardwood floors, of children's laughter echoing through empty hallways, and of a pair of fever-bright eyes that somehow saw through the walls he had built around himself. Morning arrived with unfamiliar sounds, small feet padding across hardwood floors, whispered conversations, even a muffled giggle. Thomas lay still, momentarily disoriented, before remembering the previous day's events. Checking his watch, he saw it was barely 6:30 a.m., earlier than the boys should be awake after such an exhausting day. He found them in the kitchen, attempting to make breakfast without waking anyone. Ethan stood on a stool, carefully pouring cereal into bowls, while Noah struggled with the milk carton. "Good morning," Thomas said, startling them. "We didn't want to bother you," Ethan explained quickly. "We always make our own breakfast when Mom has early substitute jobs." Thomas nodded, impressed by their independence. "That's very considerate, but your guest's here. Let me help." To his own surprise, Thomas found himself enjoying the simple act of preparing breakfast with the twins. Their questions about the house, the neighborhood, and his work flowed naturally, without the awkward pauses that usually filled his rare social interactions. The next week unfolded in a pattern Thomas could never have anticipated. Each morning, he would drive the twins to the hospital to visit Sarah before school. Then his driver would take them to their elementary school in Dorchester, while Thomas attended meetings. In the afternoons, the driver would collect the boys and bring them back to the mansion, where Mrs. Peterson had taken to preparing after-school snacks, something she hadn't done since Michael was alive. Sarah's condition improved gradually. The pneumonia responded to antibiotics, but her recovery was slower than expected due to long-term exhaustion and poor nutrition, the silent markers of a single mother stretching herself too thin for too long. "The doctors say I might be able to come home next week," Sarah told Thomas during one of his daily visits. The twins were in the hospital playroom, giving the adults a rare moment alone. "That's wonderful news," Thomas replied, genuinely pleased. "But there's no rush. Your health is the priority." Sarah studied him, her head tilted slightly. "Why are you doing all this, Thomas? Taking care of my boys, paying my medical bills, visiting every day. We're complete strangers to you." Thomas shifted uncomfortably in the hospital chair. How could he explain something he didn't fully understand himself? "I suppose I was in the right place at the right time," he said finally. Sarah's lips curved in a gentle smile. "That explains the first day, but not everything since. The boys told me you're a very important businessman with a huge company. Surely you have better things to do than chauffeur 2 hyperactive 10-year-olds around Boston." Thomas found himself returning her smile, something that was happening with increasing frequency. "You'd be surprised how refreshing it is to discuss Marvel superheroes instead of quarterly earnings projections." Sarah laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at her IV. "They can be overwhelming. I hope they haven't broken anything valuable in your castle." "My what?" Thomas asked, confused. "That's what they call your house. They say it's like a castle from a fairy tale, but sad because the king lives there all alone." Thomas felt an unexpected pang at the children's perception. They're remarkably perceptive for 10-year-olds. They've had to be, Sarah said, her expression turning serious. Life hasn't always been easy for us, especially this past year. After I lost my teaching position and my father passed, she stopped, collecting herself. Let's just say they've had to grow up faster than I would have liked. Thomas nodded, understanding all too well how adversity accelerated maturity. They're extraordinary kids. You should be proud. I am, Sarah said softly, every single day. She hesitated, then added, they've grown quite attached to you, you know. Ethan asked if you could come to his science fair next month. Thomas felt a flutter of panic. Temporary assistance during a crisis was one thing. Ongoing involvement was another matter entirely. Yet before he could formulate a response, Sarah reached out and touched his hand lightly. I'm not pressuring you, she assured him. I understand this is a temporary arrangement. Once I'm discharged, we'll go back to our apartment, and you can return to your normal life. The words should have brought relief. Instead, Thomas felt an inexplicable hollowness at the thought of the mansion returning to its silent state. Let's not worry about that yet, he said. Focus on getting stronger first. Back at the mansion that evening, Thomas found himself breaking another of his long-standing rules. Instead of retreating to his study after dinner, he joined the twins in the media room where they had convinced Mrs. Peterson to let them watch a movie. Thomas, Noah exclaimed when he entered, we're watching How to Train Your Dragon. Have you seen it? I haven't, Thomas admitted, lowering himself onto the sofa beside them. It's only our favorite movie ever, Ethan informed him seriously. We've seen it like 20 times. Then I'm in good hands with such experienced guides, Thomas replied, surprising himself with the ease of the banter. As the movie played, Thomas found himself engrossed not just in the story, but in the boys' reactions, their anticipation before favorite scenes, their mouthed recitation of beloved lines, their unself-conscious delight. When had he last experienced anything with such uninhibited joy? Toothless reminds me of you, Noah commented during a quiet moment. Thomas raised an eyebrow. The dragon reminds you of me? Should I be offended? Both boys giggled. No, it's a compliment, Noah insisted. He seems scary at first, but he's actually nice once you get to know him. And he doesn't have anyone, Ethan added, until he finds Hiccup. The innocent observation struck deeper than the child could know. Thomas had built his reputation on being unapproachable, intimidating, a necessary persona in the cutthroat world of tech. The isolation had suited him after losing his family. It kept the pain contained. But now, with these children seeing through his carefully constructed armor, he felt simultaneously exposed and liberated. After the movie, as Thomas helped the twins prepare for bed, another routine that had developed organically, Ethan asked the question Thomas had been dreading. Thomas, how come you live in this huge house all by yourself? Thomas froze, toothpaste tube in hand. Noah, sensing the tension, elbowed his brother. It's okay, Thomas said quietly. It's a fair question. He guided them back to their rooms, sitting on the edge of Ethan's bed. I didn't always live here alone. I had a family once. My wife, Jennifer, and our son Michael. The twins exchanged glances. Where are they now? Noah asked softly. Thomas swallowed hard. There was an accident 5 years ago. They didn't survive. The simple statement encompassed a universe of pain, but somehow speaking the words aloud to these children felt different than the perfunctory explanations he'd given to business associates over the years. That's why you have a sad room, Ethan said, nodding as if confirming something. A sad room? Thomas asked. The blue door at the end of the hall, Noah explained. We saw you standing outside it yesterday. You looked really sad, so we figured it must be a sad room. Thomas felt his chest tighten. They had seen him outside Michael's room. Yes, he acknowledged. That was my son's room. Michael was a little younger than you when the accident happened. Do you miss them a lot? Ethan asked, his voice small. Every day, Thomas answered honestly. Noah climbed onto the bed beside his brother, facing Thomas. Our grandpa used to say that when someone leaves us, they're still watching from the stars. Maybe Michael and Your wife are up there with him having adventures." The childish comfort offered with such earnest sincerity broke something open inside Thomas. "Maybe they are," he managed, his voice rough with emotion. "You could show us a picture of them." "Sometime," Ethan suggested, "if you want to. Mom says it's good to remember the happy times." Thomas nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He hadn't looked at family photos in years, keeping them locked away like his grief. "Time for sleep now," he finally said, tucking them in, an act that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. Later that night, Thomas found himself doing something he hadn't done in 5 years. He opened the drawer of his desk and removed a leather-bound photo album. With trembling fingers, he turned the pages, allowing himself to look, really look, at the faces of his wife and son. Jennifer's laugh, captured mid-motion as she pushed Michael on a swing. Michael's gap-toothed grin as he held up a trophy from his first swimming competition. Their last Christmas together, all three wrapped in matching scarves in front of the tree. The pain was still there, sharp and immediate. But alongside it, for the first time, Thomas felt something else, a bittersweet gratitude for having had them in his life at all, however briefly. He selected a framed photo of the three of them at the beach and placed it on his bedside table where he would see it first thing in the morning. The following days brought subtle shifts in the mansion's atmosphere. Thomas rearranged meetings to attend Ethan and Noah's parent-teacher conferences, learning that despite their challenging circumstances, both boys excelled academically. He helped them with homework in the evenings, impressed by Ethan's scientific mind and Noah's creative writing skills. Mrs. Peterson, initially bewildered by the disruption to the household's strict routines, now moved through the mansion with a lightness Thomas hadn't seen in years. She baked cookies unprompted, stocked the refrigerator with child-friendly snacks, and even dug out board games from the attic that had once belonged to Michael. On Sunday afternoon, Thomas received an unexpected call from the hospital. Sarah had developed a high fever overnight, a potential complication from the pneumonia. When he arrived at Massachusetts General, he found her pale and frightened. "The doctors want to run more tests," she told him, her voice weak. "They're worried about a secondary infection." Thomas sat beside her bed, projecting a calm he didn't feel. "Whatever it is, we'll handle it. You're in the best hands possible." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "The boys, they can't see me like this. It would terrify them." "I'll take care of them," Thomas promised. "You focus on getting better." "I've never been away from them this long," Sarah whispered. "Not since they were born." Thomas hesitated, then took her hand, a gesture that would have been unthinkable to him 2 weeks ago. "Sarah, they're safe and well cared for, and they're incredibly resilient, just like their mother." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "You hardly know me." "I know enough," Thomas replied simply. When the nurses came to take Sarah for tests, Thomas stepped out to call the mansion. Mrs. Peterson answered, informing him that the boys were in the garden with the sprinkler, enjoying the warm spring day. "Don't tell them about the setback," Thomas instructed. "Just say their mother needs more rest, and we'll visit tomorrow instead." That evening, he organized an impromptu movie marathon to distract the twins from the missed hospital visit. Sprawled on the media room floor with popcorn and sodas, another break from the mansion's usual decorum, Thomas watched the boys laugh at the animated antics on screen and felt an unfamiliar warmth spreading through his chest. It wasn't until they were all drifting to sleep, the twins on either side of him on the massive sectional sofa, that Thomas identified the sensation. It was contentment. For the first time in 5 years, the mansion felt like a home. Monday morning brought a call from Dr. Patel. Sarah's secondary infection had been identified and was responding to treatment, but her recovery would take longer than initially expected. "She's asking for her sons," the doctor added. "Seeing them might boost her spirits." Thomas arranged for the boys to skip morning classes, driving them to the hospital himself. In the elevator, he knelt to their level, explaining the situation. "Your Mom is going to be fine, but she's still quite sick. She might look tired and she'll have some extra tubes helping her get medicine. Try not to look scared, okay?" The twins nodded solemnly. "We can be brave," Noah assured him. We'll make her laugh, Ethan added. Laughter is the best medicine. Thomas smiled at the familiar saying. That's exactly what she needs. The reunion was emotional. Despite their promises, both boys teared up at the sight of their mother looking so frail. But true to their word, they quickly composed themselves, recounting amusing stories from their stay at the mansion, how Thomas had burned the toast, trying to make them breakfast, how they'd taught Mrs. Peterson to play video games, how they'd found a family of rabbits living in the garden. Sarah listened with obvious delight, her eyes moving between her sons and Thomas with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. When the boys went to the vending machine for snacks, she turned to him. They're flourishing with you, she said quietly. I've never seen them so animated, so secure. Thomas shook his head. That's all you, Sarah. You've given them roots, strong enough to thrive anywhere. Maybe, she conceded, but you've given them something too, a glimpse of possibilities beyond our struggle. Noah told me he wants to be a tech businessman like you when he grows up. Thomas felt an unexpected pride at her words. He'd be excellent at it. He has a natural charm that can't be taught. Sarah smiled. And Ethan says you're helping him build a model for the science fair. Something about renewable energy. A simple solar panel demonstration, Thomas confirmed. He came up with the concept himself. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only when Sarah spoke again, her voice soft but determined. I don't want them to get too attached, Thomas, to this lifestyle, to your home, but to you. The word stung more than Thomas expected. I understand, he said stiffly. Sarah reached for his hand. No, you don't. I'm not saying this to push you away. I'm saying it because I'm afraid. Afraid they'll be heartbroken when this temporary arrangement ends. Afraid I won't be able to give them what they've grown accustomed to. Afraid they'll resent returning to our reality. Thomas saw the genuine concern in her eyes and felt his defensiveness melt away. Sarah, I wouldn't do anything to hurt them. Or you. I know, she said simply. That's what scares me most of all. 3 weeks after her initial hospitalization, Sarah Miller was finally deemed well enough for discharge. The secondary infection had been stubborn, requiring an extended course of specialized antibiotics and close monitoring. During that time, the tenuous temporary arrangement had solidified into something resembling normalcy. Thomas had rearranged his work schedule, delegating more responsibilities to his executive team to accommodate school pickups and homework sessions. The twins had established favorite spots in the mansion. Noah claimed a window seat in the library that overlooked the garden, while Ethan had become fascinated with Thomas's collection of antique clocks in the study. Mrs. Peterson, who had worked for Thomas since before his marriage, confided to him one evening that she hadn't heard so much laughter in the house since before the tragedy. On the morning of Sarah's discharge, Thomas arrived at the hospital with the twins in tow. They bounced with excitement in the elevator, each clutching handmade welcome cards. We cleaned our rooms extra good, Ethan informed Thomas, so Mom won't think we've been messy guests. And Mrs. Peterson helped us make Mom's favorite cookies, Noah added. Oatmeal raisin. Thomas smiled at their thoughtfulness. Your mother will be touched. When they entered Sarah's room, they found her dressed in clothes Thomas had sent his assistant to purchase. Her original outfit had been unsuitable after weeks in the hospital. The simple jeans and sweater were far from the designer labels that filled his own closet, but Thomas had been careful to choose items similar to what he'd seen in her apartment, not wanting to overstep. Mom! The twins cried in unison, rushing to embrace her. Sarah held them tightly, closing her eyes as if to memorize the moment. Over their heads, she mouthed a silent thank you to Thomas. The discharge process took longer than expected. Dr. Patel reviewed Sarah's medication schedule, follow-up appointments, and activity restrictions. Throughout the instructions, Thomas took careful notes on his phone, aware that Sarah appeared overwhelmed by the information. She needs to avoid strenuous activity for at least 2 more weeks, Dr. Patel emphasized. Her body has been through a significant ordeal, and complete recovery will take time. I understand, Sarah replied, though Thomas detected a note of anxiety in her voice. I've already been away from work too long. I need to find substitute. Teaching positions as soon as possible. Dr. Patel frowned. Ms. Miller, I must strongly advise against returning to work immediately. Your immune system is still compromised. Sarah's expression tightened. Doctor, with all due respect, I have 2 children to support. I don't have the luxury of an extended convalescence. Thomas cleared his throat. Actually, Sarah, I wanted to discuss that with you. I think it would be best if you and the boys stayed at my home until you're fully recovered. The room fell silent. The twins looked between the adults with hopeful expressions while Sarah's face registered shock. That's not necessary, she said carefully. You've done more than enough already. It makes practical sense, Thomas pressed, shifting into the logical, persuasive tone that had served him well in countless business negotiations. Your doctor advises rest. The boys are already settled in my home and attending school from there. And frankly, my house has more space for you to recover comfortably. Dr. Patel nodded approvingly. From a medical perspective, having assistance during your recovery would be ideal, Ms. Miller. Sarah bit her lip, clearly torn. I don't want to impose any further. Please, Mom, Ethan pleaded. Thomas has a pool we haven't even used yet because he said we had to wait for you. And the garden is starting to get really pretty with all the spring flowers, Noah added. Thomas watched Sarah's resolve waver in the face of her son's enthusiasm. It's not an imposition, he said quietly. It's what friends do for each other. Something flickered in Sarah's eyes at the word friends. After a moment, she nodded. All right, but only until I'm back on my feet. The twins cheered, high-fiving each other, while the adults exchanged a look laden with unspoken complexity. The drive back to Beacon Hill was charged with anticipation. Sarah sat in the front passenger seat of Thomas's car, gazing out at the city as if seeing it for the first time. The boys chatted excitedly from the back seat, eager to show their mother all their discoveries in the mansion. And Thomas has this amazing chess set with pieces carved from jade, Ethan was saying. He's been teaching us how to play. And there's a real movie theater room, Noah added, with seats that recline and cup holders and everything. Thomas glanced at Sarah, expecting to see discomfort at these reminders of the wealth gap between them. Instead, he found her smiling softly at her son's excitement. It sounds like you've been having quite the adventure, she said. The biggest adventure was when Thomas took us to his company, Ethan continued. Everyone there calls him Mr. Reynolds and stands up when he walks in the room. Except for Miss Diane, Noah corrected. She just rolls her eyes and tells him he's late for meetings. Thomas laughed. My executive assistant has known me too, long to be intimidated. As they approached the gates of the mansion, Thomas felt a strange nervousness. How would Sarah react to the opulence that had become commonplace to the twins? Would she feel out of place, uncomfortable? The last thing he wanted was for her to feel like a charity case. Mrs. Peterson had outdone herself in preparation for Sarah's arrival. The mansion gleamed with polish. Fresh flowers adorned every room and the aroma of home-cooked food wafted from the kitchen. She greeted Sarah with unexpected warmth, taking her hand in both of hers. It's wonderful to finally meet you, Miss Miller. Your boys have brightened this old house considerably. Sarah smiled, visibly relaxed by the housekeeper's genuine welcome. Please call me Sarah, and thank you for looking after my sons. They've talked about you non-stop. The twins gave Sarah an enthusiastic tour, pulling her from room to room while Thomas followed at a respectful distance. He watched her expressions carefully, the widening of her eyes at the grand staircase, her soft gasp at the library filled floor to ceiling with books, her bemused smile at the media room with its theater-sized screen. And this is where we've been sleeping, Ethan announced, showing her the connecting guest rooms. But Mrs. Peterson prepared a special room for you. Sarah's assigned guest suite was the most elegant in the house, aside from the master bedroom. Decorated in soothing blues and creams, it featured a sitting area, a luxurious bathroom with a soaking tub, and French doors leading to a private balcony overlooking the garden. This is too much, Sarah murmured, running her hand over the silky bedspread. You need a comfortable place to recuperate, Thomas said simply. The doctor was quite clear about that. Before Sarah could respond, Noah tugged at her hand. Come see the garden, Mum. There's a fountain with actual fish in it. By dinner time, Sarah was visibly exhausted but determined not to show it. The four of them ate in the informal dining nook off the kitchen. Thomas had correctly guessed that the formal dining room would feel too overwhelming. Mrs. Peterson had prepared Sarah's favorite meal. Information extracted from the twins during her absence. "This pot roast is incredible," Sarah commented, "just like my mother used to make." "Mrs. Peterson is the best cook ever," Noah declared loyally. "Even better than the restaurant we went to for Thomas's birthday." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Your birthday?" Thomas nodded, slightly embarrassed. "It was last week. Nothing special." "We made him cards," Ethan said proudly. "And Mrs. Peterson helped us bake a cake." "I'm sorry I missed it," Sarah said softly. Thomas met her gaze. There was nothing to miss. It was just another day. But it hadn't been just another day. For the first time in 5 years, Thomas had celebrated his birthday, not with the perfunctory congratulations from colleagues or the obligatory calls from distant relatives, but with handmade cards, slightly lopsided chocolate cake, and genuine warmth. The twins had insisted on candles and singing, and Thomas had found himself making a wish as he blew them out, something he hadn't done since childhood. After dinner, despite Sarah's protests, Thomas insisted she rest while he supervised the twins' bedtime routine. By the time he returned downstairs, he found Sarah in the library, examining the bookshelves with interest. "The boys said you read to them every night," she said without turning around. "From the Chronicles of Narnia." Thomas nodded, though she couldn't see him. They're remarkably attentive listeners. Sarah selected a book and ran her fingers over the embossed cover. "These were my favorites as a child. I've been reading my old paperback copies to the boys, but they're falling apart now." "They can borrow any books they like," Thomas offered. "I've hardly touched most of them in years." Sarah turned to face him, her expression serious. "Why are you doing this, Thomas? And please don't say you were in the right place at the right time again. I want the real answer." Thomas moved further into the room, considering his response carefully. No one had challenged him this directly in years. His employees were too intimidated, his business associates too deferential. It was refreshing, if uncomfortable. "I'm not entirely sure myself," he admitted finally. "When I saw the boys in the park that day, something shifted. And then meeting you, seeing how ill you were, but still fighting." He paused, searching for the right words. "I suppose I recognized something in all of you that I'd lost. A kind of resilience and connection that had been missing from my life." Sarah studied him, her head tilted slightly. "The twins told me about your family. I'm so sorry for your loss." Thomas nodded, the familiar tightness returning to his chest. "Jennifer and Michael were everything to me. After the accident, I just existed. Work, sleep, repeat. Nothing else seemed important." "And now?" Sarah asked softly. Thomas looked toward the staircase, where the sounds of the twins preparing for bed could still be faintly heard. "Now I'm remembering what it's like to care about something beyond quarterly reports and stock prices." Sarah took a step closer to him. "Thank you for your honesty, and for everything you've done for us. But Thomas, I need you to understand something." Her voice grew firmer. "I won't let my boys become a replacement for what you've lost. That wouldn't be fair to anyone. Not to them, not to you, and not to the memory of your son." Thomas felt as if she'd read his deepest, most unacknowledged fear. "I would never—" "I know you wouldn't intentionally," Sarah interrupted gently, "but grief can make us grasp at shadows of what we've lost. Ethan and Noah are their own people, with their own destinies. They can't fill the hole left by Michael." The full truth of her words stung, but Thomas recognized the wisdom in them. "You're right," he acknowledged. "And I promise you that's not what this is about. Not anymore." Sarah seemed satisfied with his response. "Good, because they adore you, and I don't want to see anyone hurt when this arrangement ends." The reminder of the arrangement's temporary nature hung between them, neither willing to examine it too closely. The following days established a new rhythm in the mansion. Sarah regained strength gradually, spending mornings resting and afternoons with the twins after school. Thomas worked from home more frequently, converting part of his study into a makeshift office. Dinners became lively affairs, with the twins recounting school adventures and Sarah sharing stories from her teaching days. One evening, about a week after Sarah's arrival, Thomas was helping Ethan with a particularly challenging math problem when Noah appeared in the study doorway. "Thomas," he asked hesitantly, "can I ask you something important?" Thomas set down his pen. "Of course." Noah twisted his hands nervously. "The door at the end of the hall, the blue one. Was that really Michael's room?" Thomas felt his chest tighten. "Yes, it was." "What was he like?" Noah asked softly. The question caught Thomas off guard. No one had asked him about Michael in years, not as a person, a child with preferences and quirks and dreams. People had expressed condolences, of course, but had quickly moved on, uncomfortable with his grief. He was, Thomas began, then paused as memories flooded back. He was curious about everything, always asking questions, wanting to understand how things worked. He loved baseball and space and chocolate ice cream with sprinkles. He hated having his picture taken, but loved being in home videos. He used to wake up early on Saturdays just to watch cartoons with me. Noah listened intently, then asked, "Do you think he would have liked us, me and Ethan?" Thomas felt something break and heal simultaneously in his chest. "He would have adored you both. You would have been the best of friends." Ethan, who had been silent during this exchange, spoke up. Could we see his room sometime? Not to touch anything, just to see." Thomas's first instinct was refusal. Michael's room had remained sealed, a preserved monument to his lost son. But looking at the twins' earnest faces, he found himself reconsidering. Perhaps it was time to open that door, literally and figuratively. "Let me think about it," he said finally. That night, after everyone else had gone to bed, Thomas stood outside the blue door, key in hand. For 5 years, the room had remained exactly as Michael had left it that final morning. Bed unmade because they'd been running, late, pajamas tossed on the floor, half-finished Lego project on the desk. The cleaning staff had been instructed never to enter, and Thomas himself had only gone in once the day after the funeral to sit in silent vigil until dawn. With a deep breath, he inserted the key and turned it. The door swung open silently, revealing a time capsule of his son's brief life. Thomas stepped inside, half expecting the crushing grief that had driven him from this room years ago. Instead, he felt a bittersweet ache, painful but no longer unbearable. He moved through the space slowly, touching Michael's possessions, the baseball mitt still shaped to his small hand, the collection of rocks and shells from family vacations, the solar system mobile Jennifer had helped him make for a science project. Each item held memories, but now they brought smiles along with tears. The following morning at breakfast, Thomas made an announcement that left the twins wide-eyed with surprise. "I've been thinking about your question, about seeing Michael's room," he said, buttering a piece of toast with careful precision. "If you'd like, we could go in there today after school." Ethan and Noah exchanged glances, their twin telepathy in full effect. "Really?" Ethan asked cautiously. Thomas nodded. "Really? I think it's time." Sarah, who had been quietly observing the exchange, reached across the table and squeezed Thomas's hand briefly. The simple gesture conveyed more understanding than words could have. The day seemed to crawl by for Thomas. He found himself unable to focus on work, his mind repeatedly drifting to the blue door at the end of the hallway and what lay behind. It, not just the physical artifacts of his son's life, but the emotional significance of sharing that space with others after so long. When the twins returned from school, bursting with energy and stories, Thomas led them upstairs. Sarah followed at a distance, clearly uncertain whether her presence was welcome for this intimate moment. "You should come too," Thomas said quietly when he noticed her hesitation. "If you want to." Outside the blue door, Thomas paused. "Before we go in, I want you to understand something. This room has been closed for 5 years. It's exactly as Michael left it the day of the accident. It might seem frozen in time." The twins nodded solemnly, suddenly subdued by Thomas's serious tone. With a deep breath, Thomas unlocked the door and pushed it open. Sunlight streamed through the partially open blinds, illuminating dancing dust motes in the air. The room, with its blue walls and space-themed decor, was a testament to a 10-year-old boy's passions and personality. "Wow," Noah whispered, stepping carefully into the room. He liked space, too. Ethan moved toward the bookshelf, examining the titles with interest. He had the same Harry Potter books we do. Thomas stood in the doorway, watching as the twins explored the room with reverent curiosity. There was none of the macabre fascination he had feared, only genuine interest in the boy whose life had been preserved within these walls. "How old was he?" Noah asked, picking up a framed photograph of Michael in a baseball uniform. 10, Thomas replied. "The same age as you are now." "He had your smile," Sarah observed softly from beside him. Thomas glanced at her, surprised. "Most people said he looked more like Jennifer." "The shape of his face, maybe," Sarah conceded. "But that smile is all yours, the one you try to hide when the boys say something that amuses you." The observation was so personal, so accurate, that Thomas felt momentarily disarmed. How had this woman, whom he'd known for only a few weeks, seen something that friends of years had missed? "Can I see his baseball stuff?" Ethan asked, pointing to a shelf of trophies and memorabilia. "Of course," Thomas replied, moving fully into the room for the first time. He was a pitcher for his Little League team. Not the best, but he loved it. For the next hour, Thomas found himself sharing stories about Michael. Funny anecdotes, proud moments, even embarrassing mishaps. The words flowed more easily than he could have imagined, each memory brightening rather than dimming as it was brought into the light. The twins listened with genuine interest, occasionally drawing parallels to their own experiences or asking thoughtful questions. "Would it be okay if we played with his Lego sometimes?" Noah asked hesitantly, gesturing to the elaborate space station on Michael's desk. "We'd be super careful." The question hung in the air. 6 weeks ago, the suggestion would have been unthinkable to Thomas. Now, he found himself considering it with surprising equanimity. "I think Michael would like that," he said finally. "He always wanted someone to build with. I was never very good at it. Too impatient." The twins beamed, the permission clearly significant to them. As they continued exploring, Sarah moved to stand beside Thomas at the window. "Thank you for sharing this with them," she said quietly. "I know how difficult it must be." Thomas shook his head slightly. "Strangely, it's not as difficult as I expected. It feels right somehow." Before Sarah could respond, Thomas's phone rang. Checking the display, he frowned. "I need to take this. It's Diane. She wouldn't call unless it was important." He stepped into the hallway, closing the door partially behind him. "Diane, what?" "Is it?" His assistant's voice was tense. "Thomas, there's someone from social services here asking to speak with you. Rebecca Wilson. She says it's regarding the Miller children." Thomas felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "Did she say what it's about?" "No, but she seems quite determined. Should I tell her you're unavailable?" Thomas considered his options quickly. "No, tell her I'll be there in 30 minutes. Returning to Michael's room, he found Sarah helping the boys examine a collection of seashells from a family vacation to Cape Cod. The domestic scene struck him with its naturalness, as if they belonged there, bringing life back to a space that had been preserved in grief for too long. "Sarah, could I speak with you privately for a moment?" he asked, keeping his voice casual for the twins' benefit. In the hallway, he explained the situation. Sarah's face paled. "Social services, why would they be involved?" "I'm not sure," Thomas admitted. "But I'm going to find out. Will you be all right here with the boys while I go to the office?" Sarah nodded, though worry lines had appeared between her brows. "Of course, just call me as soon as you know anything." The drive to Reynolds Technologies headquarters in downtown Boston gave Thomas time to consider the possibilities. The most likely explanation was that someone at the hospital had filed a report about the children's living situation, standard procedure when minors were potentially at risk. But why now, weeks after Sarah's hospitalization? Rebecca Wilson was waiting in the reception area when Thomas arrived. She was younger than he had expected, perhaps in her early 30s, with a practical bob and sensible clothing. Despite her Youth, her demeanor was professional and confident as she introduced herself. "Mr. Reynolds, thank you for meeting with me on such short notice. I'm Rebecca Wilson from the Department of Children and Families." Thomas led her to his private office, instructing Diane to hold all calls. "What can I do for you, Miss Wilson?" "I'm following up on a report regarding Ethan and Noah Miller," she explained, opening a folder on her lap. "It's come to our attention that the boys have been staying in your home for several weeks now without any formal guardianship arrangement." Thomas maintained his composure despite the alarm bells ringing internally. "That's correct. Their mother was hospitalized with pneumonia. I've been providing temporary accommodation while she recovers." Rebecca made a note. "And how do you know Ms. Miller and her sons?" "We met by chance," Thomas explained, keeping his tone matter-of-fact. "The boys were selling a toy in the park. When I accompanied them home, I found Ms. Miller seriously ill and took her to the hospital." "So you had no prior relationship with the family?" "None whatsoever." Rebecca's pen paused. "Mr. Reynolds, while your generosity is commendable, you must understand how unusual this situation appears from our perspective. A wealthy, single man with no familial connection takes in 2 minor children and their mother. It raises certain questions." Thomas felt a flash of indignation. "What exactly are you implying, Ms. Wilson?" "I'm not implying anything," she replied evenly. "I'm doing my job, which is to ensure the welfare of these children. The report I received expressed concern about the nature of this arrangement and its potential impact on Ethan and Noah's emotional well-being." "Who filed this report?" Thomas asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Rebecca closed her folder. "I'm not at liberty to disclose that information. What I can tell you is that we take all reports seriously, especially when they involve children in potentially vulnerable situations." "There's nothing vulnerable about their situation," Thomas countered. "They're living in a safe home with their mother present, receiving excellent care and continuing their education without disruption." "Nevertheless, I'll need to conduct a formal assessment," Rebecca stated. "That will include interviews with the children, Ms. Miller and yourself, as well as a home inspection." Thomas leaned back in his chair, considering his options. He could refuse, of course, use his considerable influence to make this problem disappear, but that approach would only validate whatever suspicions had prompted the investigation in the first place. "When would you like to begin this assessment?" he asked instead. If Rebecca was surprised by his cooperation, she didn't show it. "As soon as possible. Tomorrow, if that works for your schedule." "Fine, 10 o'clock at my home." Thomas stood, indicating the meeting was over. "Is there anything else?" Rebecca gathered her belongings and stood as well. "Just one thing, Mr. Reynolds. During my assessment, I'll be looking at the long-term plans for this arrangement. Temporary situations that extend indefinitely can be destabilizing for children. They need consistency and clarity about their future." The statement hit uncomfortably close to a concern Thomas himself had been avoiding. What was the end game here? Sarah was recovering well. The twins were thriving in their new environment, and the thought of them returning to their cramped apartment in Dorchester filled him with an inexplicable sense of loss. "I understand," he said finally. 10 o'clock tomorrow. The drive back to Beacon Hill felt interminable. Thomas rehearsed various ways to explain the situation to Sarah, none of them satisfactory. By the time he pulled into the driveway, evening had fallen, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. He found Sarah in the kitchen, helping Mrs. Peterson prepare dinner while the twins set the table. The domestic scene, so warm and natural, made the coming conversation all the more difficult. "Boys, could you go wash?" "Up for dinner," Thomas suggested. "I need to speak with your mother privately." Their curious glances bounced between the adults before they reluctantly left the room. Mrs. Peterson, sensing the tension, murmured something about checking the roast and disappeared into the pantry. "What is it?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with worry. "What did they want?" Thomas explained the situation as succinctly as possible. With each word, Sarah's expression darkened. "They think there's something inappropriate happening," she concluded, her voice flat. "Some wealthy man rescuing a poor single mother and her children. It must look suspicious from the outside." It doesn't matter what it looks like, Thomas insisted. We know the truth. Sarah shook her head. It absolutely matters, Thomas. Perception is everything in these situations. I've seen it happen to other families. Once DCF gets involved, everything becomes complicated. We have nothing to hide, Thomas pointed out. The social worker will conduct her assessment, find nothing concerning, and that will be the end of it. You don't understand, Sarah said, frustration edging her voice. They'll be looking at everything. Our living arrangements, the boys' emotional state, my ability to provide for them. What happens when they ask about our plans? When they want to know why we're still here now that I'm recovering? What exactly is our relationship, Thomas? The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither had been willing to address. What exactly was their relationship? Benefactor and recipient? Friends? Something more complicated that defied easy categorization? Tell them the truth, Thomas said finally, that you're still recovering, that the boys are settled in school, that this arrangement is working for everyone involved right now. And when they ask about the future, when they want to know our long-term plans? Thomas had no ready answer. The future had been a deliberately unexamined territory, each day unfolding without consideration for what might come next. We'll figure it out, he said, with more confidence than he felt. The next morning brought Rebecca Wilson to the mansion, precisely at 10. She conducted a thorough inspection of the property, paying particular attention to the twins' rooms and the safety features throughout the house. Thomas had prepared the boys for her visit, explaining that she was a special kind of social worker who checked on children when their living situations changed, like when Katie Winters in our class went to live with her grandma. Ethan had asked. Similar to that, yes, Thomas confirmed. The twins were surprisingly at ease during their interviews, which Rebecca conducted individually in the garden room. From his study window, Thomas could see Noah gesturing animatedly as he spoke, while Rebecca nodded and took notes. Later, Ethan seemed equally comfortable, drawing diagrams on a notepad as he explained something to the social worker. Sarah's interview was conducted in the library, the door closed for privacy. When she emerged an hour later, her expression was unreadable. Thomas's turn came last. Rebecca sat across from him in his study, her notepad open and pen poised. The boys seem to have adjusted remarkably well, she began. They speak very highly of you, Mr. Reynolds. They're extraordinary children, Thomas replied. Resilient and adaptable. Yes, they are, which makes my concern for their emotional well-being all the more significant. Thomas tensed. What concern? Rebecca set down her pen. Mr. Reynolds, in my experience, children form attachments quickly, especially in situations where they receive sudden access to resources and experiences previously unavailable to them. Ethan and Noah have clearly grown attached to you and to this lifestyle. Is that a problem? It can be, Rebecca said carefully, when the situation is inherently temporary. Ms. Miller has indicated that she intends to return to their apartment once she's fully recovered and has secured employment. The transition back to their previous life could be traumatic for the boys after experiencing all this. She gestured to encompass the mansion and its luxuries. Thomas felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Sarah said that they'll be returning to the apartment soon? Rebecca studied him closely. You seem surprised by this information. We haven't discussed specific timelines, Thomas admitted. Her recovery has been our primary focus. I see, Rebecca made a note. Mr. Reynolds, I'll be direct with you. This arrangement, while well-intentioned, has created a potentially problematic situation. The boys are forming attachments and expectations that may not be sustainable. Ms. Miller is concerned about their growing accustomed to a lifestyle she cannot provide. And you? She paused. Your involvement raises questions about your own motivations and emotional investment. Thomas bristled. My motivation was to help. Her family in crisis. A crisis that has now largely passed, Rebecca pointed out, yet the arrangement continues without clear boundaries or endpoint. She was right, of course. Thomas had deliberately avoided defining what this was. this strange makeshift family they had formed. Every time the subject of Sarah and the twins returning to their apartment arose, he found ways to defer the conversation, to extend their stay with practical justifications that masked his deeper reluctance to see them leave. "What are you suggesting?" he asked finally. "I'm recommending a formal transition plan," Rebecca replied. "A clear timeline for Ms. Miller and the boys to return to independent living with appropriate support to ease the transition. Additionally, I'd suggest counseling for the boys to help them process this experience in a healthy way." Thomas nodded mechanically, his mind racing ahead to implications Rebecca couldn't possibly understand. The thought of the mansion returning to its former silence, of evenings without homework questions and dinner conversations, of waking up to empty hallways instead of the sounds of children preparing for school. It created a hollow sensation in his chest that felt dangerously like grief. And if they didn't leave? He found himself asking. Rebecca frowned. "I don't understand." What if there was a more permanent arrangement, not just temporary assistance during a crisis, but something more formal? Rebecca's expression shifted from confusion to surprise. "Mr. Reynolds, are you suggesting some form of guardianship arrangement?" "I'm not sure what I'm suggesting," Thomas admitted. "I just know that the thought of them leaving feels—" He struggled to find the right word. "Wrong." Rebecca closed her notebook and regarded him seriously. "Mr. Reynolds, I appreciate your honesty, but I need to be clear. Any permanent change to the boys' living situation would require extensive evaluation and legal procedures. Ms. Miller's parental rights are intact and primary, unless she were to agree to some form of shared custody arrangement, which is highly unusual outside of romantic relationships." "I understand," Thomas interrupted, unwilling to hear the full legal impossibility laid out. After Rebecca left, promising to submit her report within a week, Thomas remained in his study, the social worker's words echoing in his mind. Sarah had told the social worker they would be returning to their apartment soon. She had been making plans to leave, while he had been unconsciously building fantasies of permanence. Dinner that evening was a subdued affair, the twins, sensitive to the adult tension but unaware of its cause, attempted to fill the silence with school stories and questions about the weekend. Thomas and Sarah responded with forced enthusiasm that didn't reach their eyes. After the boys went to bed, Thomas found Sarah in the library, staring out at the darkened garden. "You told the social worker you're planning to leave soon," he said without preamble. Sarah turned, her expression resigned. "Yes." "When were you going to tell me?" "I've been trying to tell you for weeks, Thomas. Every time I mention finding a job or looking for a new apartment, you change the subject, or find reasons why I should wait. Just a little longer." The accuracy of her observation stung. "I was concerned about your health. My health is fine now. The doctor cleared me for normal activity 2 weeks ago." Sarah moved away from the window, closer to him. "Thomas, this was always temporary. You knew that, I knew that. It's time for us to go back to our real lives. And what if I don't want you to go?" The words escaped before he could consider their implications. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. "What are you saying?" Thomas ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of discomposure from a man known for his control. "I don't know exactly. I just know that the thought of you and the boys leaving, of this house going back to what it was before, empty and silent and cold, I can't bear it. We can't stay here forever, Thomas. This isn't our world." Sarah's voice was gentle, but firm. "I've already contacted my old landlord. Our apartment will be available at the end of the month. So that's it. After everything we've shared, everything we've been through together, you're just going to walk away." Sarah's expression hardened. "That's unfair. I'm incredibly grateful for everything you've done for us. But gratitude isn't a foundation for whatever this is becoming. I need to stand on my own feet again to provide for my boys independently, and they need to understand that our real life isn't mansions and housekeepers and unlimited resources." "Why not?" Thomas challenged. "Why can't this be their real life? Why can't it be our real life?" The question hung between them, laden with unspoken emotions. Sarah's gaze searched his face, looking for something Thomas wasn't sure he could provide. "Because you're still in love with ghosts, Thomas," she said finally, her voice soft with compassion rather than accusation. "Jennifer and Michael are still the center of your world. We've been a temporary distraction, a way to feel something again without having to truly move forward." The words cut deep precisely because they contained a kernel of truth. Thomas had opened Michael's room, had shared stories and memories, but had he truly begun to move forward? Or was he simply using Sarah and the twins as a bridge between past and present, a way to reconnect with life without fully committing to a new future? "That's not fair," he said, though his protest lacked conviction. "Isn't it?" Sarah challenged gently. "Thomas, I care about you, more than I expected to, more than is probably wise. The boys adore you, but I won't let us become substitutes for what you've lost. And I won't build a life on foundations of grief and gratitude. We all deserve better than that." With those words, she moved past him toward the door. Thomas reached out, catching her hand as she passed. "Sarah, wait, please." She paused, not pulling away but not turning back either. "What if it's not about substitution?" he asked, his voice low and urgent. "What if it's about finding something new, something I never expected? What if it's about you, not as Jennifer's, a replacement, but as yourself? About Ethan and Noah as themselves, not as substitutes for Michael?" Slowly, Sarah turned to face him. "Is that what this is?" she asked. "Or is that what you want it to be?" It was a question Thomas couldn't answer with certainty. All he knew was that the prospect of losing them felt like standing on the edge of an abyss, a return to the half-life he had been living before that chance encounter in the park. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'd like the chance to find out." Sarah withdrew her hand gently. "I need time to think, Thomas, and so do you." As she left the library, Thomas remained rooted in place, confronting emotions he had kept at bay for weeks. The social worker's visit had forced a reckoning he had been avoiding, not just about Sarah and the twins' future, but about his. The following days in the Reynolds mansion were marked by a strange formality that had never existed before. Sarah and Thomas maintained polite, almost distant interactions, their conversations limited to practical matters regarding the twins. The boys, sensitive to the shift in atmosphere, became uncharacteristically subdued, exchanging worried glances, when they thought no one was looking. Rebecca Wilson's report arrived a week after her visit, delivered in a crisp manila envelope to Thomas's office. Its conclusions were diplomatically phrased but clear. While there were no immediate concerns for the children's welfare, the current living arrangement was potentially problematic for long-term emotional development without clearer boundaries and expectations. She recommended a structured transition plan to help the twins readjust to their previous living situation, including counseling to process the experience. Thomas read the report twice before setting it aside, unable to argue, with its rational assessment yet unwilling to accept its implications. That evening he found himself once again standing outside Michael's room, drawn by an impulse he couldn't fully articulate. Inside, the space had subtly transformed over the past weeks. While still recognizably Michael's room, it now bore evidence of the twins' presence, a chess set mid-game on the desk, a stack of library books on space exploration by the bed, a science fair project taking shape in the corner. The boys had kept their promise to treat the room with respect, but they had also breathed life into a space that had been preserved in amber for too long. Thomas sat on the edge of the bed, picking up a framed photograph of Michael from the nightstand. His son's gap-toothed grin stared back at him, eternally frozen at age 10. "What would you think of all this, buddy?" Thomas asked softly. "Of Ethan and Noah? Of Sarah? Of me letting people in again?" The question hung in the silence, unanswerable yet somehow necessary. For the first time, Thomas allowed himself to imagine what Michael might have become had he lived, a teenager now, perhaps with the same scientific curiosity as Ethan or the creative spirit of Noah. Would he have been tall like Thomas or graceful like Jennifer? Would he have made the baseball team in high school or found other passions? These thoughts, once too painful to bear, now came with a bittersweet ache, rather than searing agony. Thomas realized with startling clarity that he could hold both realities simultaneously, the grief for what was lost and the possibility of what might still be found. "I'll always miss you," he whispered to the photograph. "Both of you. But I think it's time for me to live again." The next morning, Thomas called an emergency meeting of his executive team. For 2 hours, they discussed restructuring the company's leadership, delegation of responsibilities, and implementation of remote work protocols. By noon, Thomas had effectively reduced his required office presence to 3 days a week, with the flexibility to handle remaining duties from home. His next call was to his lawyer, with specific instructions regarding property in Dorchester and the establishment of an educational trust. Finally, he contacted a real estate agent about a townhouse in Cambridge he had noticed was for sale, close to Harvard Square, within walking distance of excellent schools and significantly more modest than his Beacon Hill mansion. That evening, Thomas found Sarah in the garden, watching the twins play an elaborate game of their own invention involving the fountain, several tennis balls, and rules that seemed to shift with each round. "Could we talk?" he asked, gesturing toward a stone bench partially hidden by flowering shrubs. Sarah nodded, her expression guarded as she followed him to the secluded spot. For a moment they sat in silence, watching a pair of cardinals flit between branches above them. "I received the social worker's report," Thomas began. "So did I," Sarah replied. "Her recommendations were what I expected." Thomas nodded. "They were reasonable from her perspective, but I've been thinking about alternatives." Sarah turned to face him fully, wariness in her eyes. "What kind of alternatives?" "First," Thomas said carefully, "I want to apologize for my reaction the other night. You were right, I needed to examine my own motivations, to make sure this isn't just about filling a void or replacing what I've lost." "And?" Sarah prompted when he paused. "And it's not," Thomas stated with quiet certainty. "What I feel for you and the boys is entirely new. It's not about substitution or distraction. It's about finding something I never expected to find again, connection, purpose, joy." Sarah's expression softened slightly, but she remained silent, waiting for him to continue. "I know you're concerned about independence, about standing on your own feet," Thomas acknowledged. "That's one of the things I admire most about you, your strength and determination. So I'm not asking you to stay here, to continue this exact arrangement." "What are you asking, Thomas?" Sarah's voice was barely above a whisper. Thomas took a deep breath. "I'm asking if you'd consider a different arrangement altogether, one where we figure out the future together, as a family." The word hung between them, laden with significance. Sarah's eyes widened. "Thomas, are you—" "I love you, Sarah," he interrupted, the words finally spoken aloud after weeks of growing in his heart. "Not because you needed my help, or because your sons remind me of what I lost. I love you because of who you are, your resilience, your wisdom, your capacity for joy despite hardship. I love Ethan's curious mind and Noah's creative spirit. I love the people you are, not shadows of who I've lost." Sarah remained silent, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm not proposing we stay in this mansion forever," Thomas continued. "In fact, I've been looking at a townhouse in Cambridge, still comfortable but not ostentatious, somewhere we could build something new, together, on equal footing." "Thomas," Sarah finally spoke, her voice unsteady, "this is overwhelming. A week ago you were avoiding any discussion of the future, and now you're talking about building a life together." "I know it seems sudden," Thomas acknowledged, "but I think we both know this has been building for weeks. The social worker's visit just forced me to confront feelings I've been avoiding." Sarah shook her head, not in rejection but in bewilderment. "You're talking about completely transforming our lives, yours, mine, the boys'. It's not a decision to make impulsively." "You're right," Thomas conceded, "which is why I'm not asking for an immediate answer. I'm asking you to consider it, to give us time to explore what this could be." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. Sarah's breath caught as he opened it, revealing not A diamond engagement ring, as she might have feared, but a simple antique band with a small pearl surrounded by delicate filigree. "This was my grandmother's," Thomas explained. "She gave it to me before she died, saying it should go to someone who brings light back into my life." He closed the box without offering it to her. "I'm not asking you to wear it yet. I'm just showing you that my intentions are serious, that this isn't a passing impulse." Sarah's eyes moved from the box to Thomas's face, searching. "The boys would be ecstatic," she said softly. "They already see you as family." "And you?" Thomas asked, his heart pounding. "What do you see?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her gaze drifting to where the twins continued their game, oblivious to the life-altering conversation taking place nearby. "I see a man who's been wounded, but is finding his way back to life," she said finally. "A man who's shown extraordinary kindness to my children, a man I've grown to care for deeply." She turned back to him. "But I also see complications, differences in our backgrounds, in our resources, in our experiences. I see potential for resentment, for power imbalances, for mistakes." Thomas nodded, accepting her concerns as valid. "All relationships have risks, Sarah. What matters is whether we face them together, with honesty and mutual respect." "It sounds so simple," Sarah said with a small smile. "Not simple," Thomas corrected. "Worth it." Their conversation was interrupted by Ethan's excited shout. "Mom, Thomas, look what we found." The twins raced over, Noah carefully cradling something in his cupped hands. When he opened them, a tiny frog sat blinking in confusion at its sudden audience. "He was swimming in the fountain," Ethan explained breathlessly. "Can we keep him, please?" The mundane yet momentous question, a normal family negotiation about a potential pet, seemed to crystallize the decision facing them. Thomas looked at Sarah, silently communicating that this was her call. "Not in the house," Sarah said firmly, "but maybe we could build him a habitat in the garden if Thomas doesn't mind." "Really?" Noah's face lit up. "A frog habitat." Thomas smiled. "I think that's a wonderful idea. We could all work on it together this weekend." The simple exchange, domestic and ordinary, carried the weight of possibility, of future weekends building frog habitats, of science projects and family dinners, of a life intertwined rather than separate. Later that night, after the twins were asleep, Sarah found Thomas in his study. The toy car the boys had sold him weeks ago sat prominently on his desk, its chipped paint and dangling door somehow more valuable than the expensive artifacts that had previously occupied the space. "I've been thinking about what you said," Sarah began, standing in the doorway, "about building something new together." Thomas set down his tablet, giving her his full attention. "I can't give you an answer tonight," she continued. "It's too important a decision to rush. But I'd like to see this townhouse in Cambridge you mentioned, and I'd like to talk more about what this would really look like, practically, logistically, emotionally." Thomas felt hope bloom in his chest. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. It was an opening, a willingness to explore possibilities. "I'd like that too," he said simply. 3 days later, Thomas drove Sarah to see the Cambridge townhouse, a beautiful Victorian on a tree-lined street near Harvard Square. Though still far more upscale than anything Sarah had ever lived in, it lacked the intimidating grandeur of the Beacon Hill mansion. Instead, it offered warm spaces filled with light, a small garden where children could play, and a sense of community with neighbors close by. "It's lovely," Sarah admitted as they toured the empty rooms. "The boys would be able to walk to school." "And you could finish your master's degree at Harvard," Thomas added. "I looked into their education program. They have excellent scholarships for returning teachers." Sarah looked at him in surprise. "You researched that?" "I know how much teaching means to you," Thomas said simply, "and how unfair it was that budget cuts derailed your career." As they stood in what would be the kitchen, a sunny space with windows overlooking the garden, Sarah seemed to make a decision. "I'd like to bring the boys to see it. If they like it, if we all feel it could be home, then maybe we could talk about next steps." The following weekend, Ethan and Noah raced through the empty townhouse with unbridled enthusiasm, claiming bedrooms, discovering hidden nooks, and planning where furniture should go as if the decision had already been made. Their excitement was infectious, drawing smiles from both adults as they watched the twins plot elaborate room arrangements. "They seem convinced we're moving here," Sarah observed quietly. "And how do you feel about it?" Thomas asked. Sarah was quiet for a moment, watching her sons measure a wall with exaggerated arm spans. "I feel hopeful," she said finally. "Scared, but hopeful." That evening, after returning to the mansion, Thomas surprised everyone by suggesting a picnic dinner in Boston Public Garden, the very place where he had first encountered the twins. As they spread a blanket near the lagoon where the famous swan boats floated, the symmetry of the moment wasn't lost on any of them. "This is where we met Thomas," Noah exclaimed, pointing to a spot near the path. "Right over there, where we had our stand." "With Grandpa's car," Ethan added, glancing at Thomas with a smile. The impromptu picnic stretched into twilight, with the twins chasing fireflies, while Thomas and Sarah sat side by side on the blanket, shoulders touching lightly. "I've been thinking about what you said," Sarah began, her voice soft in the gathering dusk. "About finding something new, not replacing what was lost." Thomas nodded, not wanting to interrupt her train of thought. "I believe you," she continued. "I've seen how you've changed, how you've opened yourself to new possibilities while still honoring Jennifer and Michael's memory. That's important to me." She turned to face him fully. "I can't promise this will be simple or straightforward. There will be adjustments, compromises, probably some difficult moments, but," she took a deep breath, "I'd like to try, to see if we can build that life together you talked about." Thomas felt a surge of emotion so powerful it momentarily robbed him of speech. When he found his voice, it was rough with feeling. "Are you saying yes?" Sarah smiled, the expression transforming her face in the soft evening light. "I'm saying let's start with the townhouse and see where the journey takes us, one step at a time." It was enough, more than enough. Thomas reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together as they watched the twins in the distance, their laughter carrying across the park where everything had begun. The transition happened gradually over the next few months. The Cambridge townhouse was purchased and renovated to suit their needs. The twins enrolled in the local school, quickly making friends in the neighborhood. Sarah began part-time classes at Harvard, working toward completing her master's degree in education, while volunteering at the boys' school. Thomas restructured his work life, balancing leadership of Reynolds Technologies with his new family priorities. He established an educational foundation in Michael's name, focused on providing technology resources to underserved schools, a project that honored his son's memory while creating something new and meaningful. Rebecca Wilson, the social worker who had initially raised concerns about their arrangement, conducted a follow-up assessment 6 months later. Her report noted the remarkable adjustment and evident well-being of the twins in their new environment, as well as the healthy, balanced family dynamic that had developed. 1 year to the day after their first meeting in Boston Public Garden, Thomas and Sarah returned to the same spot with the twins. The spring air was warm with promise, flowering trees creating a canopy of pink and white blossoms above them. "I have something to ask you," Thomas said as they sat on a bench watching the swan boats glide across the lagoon. From his pocket, he withdrew the velvet box containing his grandmother's ring. "This time I'm hoping you'll actually wear it." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she nodded, allowing him to slip the pearl ring onto her finger. The twins, who had been pretending not to eavesdrop from a nearby tree, erupted in cheers and rushed to embrace them both. "Does this mean we'll be a real family now?" Noah asked, his eyes wide with hope. "We already are a real family," Thomas assured him, drawing both boys close. "This just makes it official." Later that evening, as Sarah helped the twins prepare for bed in their Cambridge home, Thomas went to his study. On his desk sat the toy car that had started everything, the precious object 2 desperate boys had been willing to sell to help their mother. He picked it up, running his thumb over its worn surface, marveling at how something so seemingly insignificant had altered the course of 4 lives. A soft knock on the doorframe drew his attention. Sarah stood there, watching him with a gentle smile. "The boys want you to read the next chapter," she said. "They say it's not the same when I do the voices." Thomas carefully returned the toy car to its place of honor on his desk. "I'll be right there." As he followed Sarah upstairs, Thomas reflected on the journey of the past year, from isolation to connection, from grief to hope, from emptiness to fulfillment. The mansion on Beacon Hill remained in his possession, a testament to the life he had once lived and the family he had lost. But this townhouse, with its children's laughter and shared dreams, had become something he had stopped believing was possible, a home. That night, as he read to the twins, their eager faces upturned and attentive, Thomas felt the final pieces of his fragmented life shift into place. The grief would always be there, a shadow beneath the surface, but it no longer defined him. Instead, he had found a way to honor the past while embracing the future.